We were all very impressed by Daniil Dubov's spectacular win over Sergey Karjakin in the Russian Super Final. And a lot of people were saying, wow, what is this new line? This is incredible. And I thought it would be a good idea to delve a little deeper into the opening. It is absolutely fascinating. What's interesting is that far from this being a new line, if you look at the databases, in fact, this was first played in 1873, and who knows, perhaps before then as well. So let's look at this in some detail. There's also been quite a few games played between 1873 and this game played on the 16th of December 2020. So it starts out as, well, potentially a gioco piano. White can play d3 here or castle. But c3. And after knight f6, instead of the usual gioco piano move d3, d4. So this can lead to all kinds of interesting things after pawn takes pawn, and then pawn takes pawn and bishop b4 check. This is a very old line that, well, leads to equality, basically, after d5. There's also the so-called Müller attack with knight takes pawn, but it's not very good for white. It's dangerous, but not very good for white. Recently, we've seen e5 here. For example, Giri against Carlsen in 2020, one of the online tournaments went like this, which is quite interesting, but black is holding his own here. But here is where Dubov, instead of those alternatives, played pawn to b4. Let me just go through how the game went, and then what I'll do is I'll fill in the details. We need to look, for example, at bishop e7. I'll look at that in a second. But bishop b6 was played. I think Dubov chose his variation very well against Karjakin. Karjakin is known to be quite a conservative player and very well prepared, and perhaps a little unsure in positions that are very sharp and where he's unfamiliar with the opening. So here he played knight e4. d5 is a very important alternative that's actually been seen in quite a few games. But he played knight e4, which I think fell into Dubov's hands. Bishop d5 is a very nice move. It physically prevents black from freeing himself with d5. Attacks the knight, so that takes. And then bishop g5 is a good move, forcing the knight back. f6 isn't very good here, actually. Bishop h4 is a good move. Notice black cannot castle. So bishop g5, knight e7, castles, and here we have h6. And the game went like this. The critical move is g5, and white has to sack a piece. I'll perhaps look at that a little bit later on, but Karjakin played like this, and already this is extremely dangerous with this move. Bishop f6, and then we had, well, after this spectacular queen sacrifice with queen takes g6. If you haven't already seen the game, then please do check it out. You must be the last person on the planet. And Dubov won spectacularly. So let's go back, and I want to fill in the details. So I'm going to switch games to a game between Károly Honfi and Georg Polak, played in Hungary in 1957. There you go. There are lots of old games in this line. So this is the starting point of our variation, b4. And instead of bishop b6, I'd like to look at, first of all, bishop e7. And Well, as I've written here, this is definitely a more cautious approach. Although the bishop can be very useful on b6, looking at that diagonal, on e7, it does cover this diagonal and protect the king side. So in that way, it's well motivated, and I don't think black is worse after this move at all. And in this game, actually, black won. It's interesting, Honfi, famous Hungarian player, he was a very aggressive player, and actually this variation kind of suits his style. It's not a surprise to see his name attached to this variation. In fact, he played a few games with this line b4. Okay, so what should white play? Two possible moves, b5 or e5. I think it's a question of taste which you go for. So first of all, let's look at the game continuation, b5. And here, black played knight a5, which is not a bad move. I think b5 feels to me to be well, a very straightforward move, just opening up the position very quickly. And after this, okay, both sides castle. Here, white is a pawn up. You see, that's the extra pawn there. There's a nice trick here, actually. If queen takes pawn on d5, can you spot it? White's playing win. Queen e1 wins a piece. Whoops, I highlighted the wrong piece. There we go. That's quite nice. But I feel that here black has decent development. It's probably about equal. But I don't think black has anything to fear in this position at all. As I said, I think it's about equal, basically. I mean, shortly this pawn is going to disappear. But white has reasonable play. So I think d5 is a reasonable move and probably leads to a roughly level position. But after b5, knight a5 was played, which was also reasonable, because black, well, again, played in a very principled way, which was to strike out in the centre and put the knight on e4. But at least white has this kind of classic e4 kingside attacking formation with the pawn on e5, bishop on d3, knight on f3. Of course, the bishop is blocked out by the knight. So I think it's about level. And in fact, black won a very nice game. Played f5. I'm not sure f5 is the best move, actually. Here, white should have exchanged and played queen c2 and prepared to play knight d2. This is certainly better for white. But I don't think f5 is the best move. I simply prefer c6 and supporting the knight on e4 with bishop f5. And yeah, it's a very balanced position. I mean, chances for both sides, basically. Let's come back here. So b5 is just what we've just looked at. I think e5 is okay. I suppose this is more in the Dubov mould. And here, if you play as Dubov did, you can see the difference, that this bishop is much better placed on e7, covering g5. And here, I don't think that white really has enough for this pawn. d6 was played here. You could play d5 as well. Basically, I feel that black should be better in that position. So after knight e4, b5, knight here, bishop d3. Now, I think d5 will transpose to the lines we've just looked at. So, I mean, I'm not so impressed with e5. But in any case, I think after this, again, it's a kind of improved version for black of Dubov against Karjakin. I feel white does have a little bit of compensation. But I feel black should be better here. I mean, maybe this pawn is going to disappear, but yeah, maybe h6 and just castles here should be better for black. At the moment, it's 2 extra pawns, and development is pretty easy. You know, this bishop will emerge somewhere on this diagonal, and this bishop f6 as well. Should be better for black. So I think I would favour b5 here. And yeah, d5 is about equal, and likewise knight a5 is balanced chances. But I think it just shows bishop e7 is quite a reasonable alternative for black, and just kind of keeps things under control. Okay, let's switch to another game. So this is funny. So b4, that's the move. So this is Oleg Skvortsov against Vishy Anand. This game was played in Zurich in 2017 and was an exhibition match. Oleg Skvortsov, who is a Russian sponsor of chess tournaments. He has his own diamond company and he loves chess very much. And at the start of the Zurich Chess Challenge, before the tournament got underway, Vishy played a challenge match against him. And this was the game. Bishop b6, e5. So if you remember, knight e4 is what Karjakin played. But Vishy played d5, and I feel this is a very principled move. Again, a bit like the other variation. Black strikes out in the centre. And now here, well, bishop b5, knight e4 makes no sense for white. Bishop d3, knight e4, again, I don't think makes any sense. Particularly as in this position, it's actually possible to take this. And there are problems for white. On the e file, basically black is going to get the piece back. So after d5, that's the move that's just been played. White really should take on f6. And then black takes on c4. Now, even optically, this looks very pleasant for black. You know, the white centre has been destroyed. It's going to be difficult to get these pieces into play. There is a pawn on f6. So what should white play here? Well, one move which I would not recommend is b5. And this was played in this game in 1873 between Barman Chess Club and the Berlin Academy Chess Club, correspondence game. Barman, that's near where I used to live in Wuppertal. I used to live at the other end of the valley in Elberfeld. And actually, well, the Wuppertal Barman team won the game, but black didn't play very well. The Berlin Academy didn't play very well. Let's just have a quick look at this. It was good fun. You can see this is obviously the problem for black. And, well, I don't want to pass too much comment on these moves, but basically black got an absolute tonking. That bishop is just a killer piece, preventing black castling and protecting that pawn. But let's go back. So we've got this position, and actually b5 is a mistake. Knight a5, as played by the Berlin Academy, is incorrect. Castles is the right move. Because if pawn takes knight, then unsurprisingly, rook e8 check is very powerful. And then d3. Black is a piece down, but, well, you can see the state of white's development is terrible. Rook e2 threatens. That bishop on b6 starts to look like it's absolutely on the right diagonal. Winning for black. Now, after castles, white does not need to take the knight. Castling is sensible. Nevertheless, this is a difficult position for white. Let's just have a quick look. Well, first of all, this is threatened. Taking and c2. Let's throw in pawn takes pawn. And now black can either play rook e8 or king takes. Both are absolutely fine for black. But let's try king takes. And the best line of play is this. the moment, material is, I was going to say even, it's not. Black is a pawn up. But this wins an exchange. Nevertheless, that is a good old octopus knight on d3. And black with the two bishops and a pawn for the exchange has excellent compensation. So b5 isn't very good. I mean, black can also play more conservatively. In this position, you don't have to give the exchange. You could play rook e8 as well. And this also gives black better chances in the endgame. Two bishops. That bishop is going to be a starfish bish on d3. b5 is definitely a mistake. But there is a decent move, and that's queen e2 check. As played by Oleg Skvortsov and others. Bishop e6. And here it's a mistake to take on g7. Because then queen d5. Well, you can see black's development is superb here. Well, yeah, pawn is fantastic here, and rook is looking good on the g-file. So after bishop e6, b5 is the move that just shakes black up a little bit. So what does black play? D3 is not very good. Queen e4 is strong, and then basically the queen is going to take on h7, and that is a very different story. And white should be better there. That is quite an annoying pawn. Yeah, and the knight's not so good here. Knight d2 coming should be better for white. But after b5, black has a choice. You can either save the knight with knight a5, and that's reasonable. The knight's a bit out of play, but I think it's certainly playable for black. Or knight b4, as played by Anand. So Vishy played in style. He's not the only player to try this, by the way. It's interesting how after such a spectacular game as Dubov played, it attracts imitators. And in fact, there have been quite a few games played after the 16th of December with this variation, and there was one game played in this line. Game online, of course, that went pawn takes knight, queen takes pawn. Game eventually ended in a draw. Skapenko against Wittenberg. And black has obvious compensation for the piece. I mean, those two pawns are huge. But knight b4, it's such a fascinating move. So Skvortsov took on g7 first, and only then took the knight. So the point of playing the knight here is just to make sure that there are two beautiful passed pawns. The knight, I guess Anand figured the knight wasn't doing much on a5 anyway. And here he has splendid compensation. And if you haven't seen this game already, it is fantastic. Vishy was having fun with his patron. Yeah, the game went like this. d3, and Vishy gave up his queen. This is brilliant fun. I'm just going to go to the end if you haven't seen it. It's possible that white could have put up a better defense. But let me just show you what happened. After this, Vishy still is basically a queen for a piece down, but he forced a checkmate. Absolutely beautiful. Now, let's go back to the relevant bit. So I think up to here, play, I think for both sides, is pretty good. As I said, knight b4 not forced. Knight a5 is possible, but I like knight b4. It just seizes the initiative for black. But let me show you how perhaps Skvortsov could have done better. Queen e5 is possible. And, well, Vichy gave a variation where he just said black has compensation for the piece. He says black can't avoid playing a5 because I guess white is threatening to push here. And he just says black has enough compensation for the piece, which is about right. But actually, that's a reasonable position for white because he's going to be able to get his bishop out here. It's quite a nice square. And maybe he'll have to give up a piece for 2 pawns. But it's playable for white. So, just to recap, in this position, d5 is a very important alternative for black. Okay, let's get back to the main game again. Oops. Yeah, that's the game I want to look at, but let's look at it through Dubov Karjakin. So there's our starting point, b4, bishop b6, e5. Now we've just looked at pawn to d5. But let's just have a quick look at knight e4 as Karjakin played. And I think it's already very tricky because it's not simple for black to free the position here. Bishop g5, correct. And here is the critical moment in the game. And as I said, since this game was played on the 16th of December, there have been quite a few imitators. And I noticed a game between Jorn van Foreest and Ariane Tari played in a blitz game online. And Tari played a5 instead of Karjakin's h6. But van Foreest went on the attack straight away. Good move. Looking to come in here, but also looking to bring the queen into play. Queen h5. This is already desperate for black. If g6, then this is really strong. There's a pin here. So pawn takes bishop. Check. And now rook d1 with a huge initiative for white. And probably winning as well. Queen to rook just looked too strong. So, yeah, that's not very good. So Tari played like this. And here, well, Van Foreest played bishop f6 and eventually won the game, but it's probably not very good. He should play bishop takes h6. And I think, unsurprisingly, considering the number of pieces in the vicinity of black's king, this is winning for white. If that's taken, then just queen h6. Don't think there's a decent defense there. Yeah, if knight takes, then knight f5. And, well, if nothing else, there's a slow motion threat to play the rook up, as well as moves like knight g6 as well. So bishop takes h6, d6. Now queen g5 is a winning move. Threatening mate on g7. And then this nice move. Rook takes queen. And then g7 drops. Okay, a5, not very good. So let's just have a last very quick look at the game. If you're interested in playing this line, you should appreciate that castles is not the only move here. g5 is obviously critical. And then if white wants to play very conservatively, then it's possible to play like this. White has some compensation for the pawn, but I think the critical move after g5 is taking. And I would say this gives white excellent compensation. Likewise, knight takes. And simply rook e1, preventing black from playing d6. Now, as I said, if you're going to play this line, then that needs some careful examination. Oh, or you could just say, hey, I got an attack. Let's go for it. I'm ready. But yeah, it looks like very good compensation for white. I'm not surprised that Karjakin avoided that. So there you go. I think I've covered most of the important lines. Well, judging by the number of games we've seen just recently with this, it's worth looking at. If you play this with the black pieces, you need to be ready for it. And if you want to surprise your opponent, then this move, b4, is worth a shot. Thanks for watching.